Ladies and gentlemen, sports fans alike, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago. One of the couple, two, three best podcasts around. So sit back, grab yourself a cold one and a Polish sausage, park your keister in the French room, and listen to Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago.
In Chicago, you know that all sports rock. The Bears, Hawks, Bulls, Cubs, and Sox. Pick your favorite, you can choose. As long as the Packers lose. For everything you need to know, it's Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago. Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago. On this episode, we have Chicago Bear player retires. Ooh. We have JHey hitting a milestone for him. The Jake Arrieta is getting another record started, and the White Sox pitching is struggling. All this and more on this episode of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. But first, we'd like to thank our sponsor, the Rockford Ice Hogs. If you're not familiar with the Rockford Ice Hogs, they're the AHL minor league affiliate of the Chicago Blackhawks. What does that mean for you? You get to see the Stars of Tomorrow today for a family-friendly price. The season's over, but we appreciate the great season that the Rockford Ice Hogs had. So go on over to icehogs.com, get yourself some season tickets, get yourself a nice jersey, and prepare for the new season to come in October, and tell them Swerski Sports sent you. On this episode, we don't have any Blackhawks talk. We don't have any Bulls talk. With the Blackhawks, it's just rumors and whispers, because we haven't even finished up the Stanley Cup Finals yet. I guess I really don't have a horse in the race on that one, but I don't really want to see Cindy Crosby win one, so I guess I'm going to root for the Sharks. They're a little bit of a hole, but that's neither here nor there. That has nothing to do with our Blackhawks. And Bulls talk, all rumors at this point as well. So I'm going to do something I haven't done in several weeks. I'm going to start with the Chicago Bears. We are getting so close to start of training camp. So close. So we have a few things on the horizon. Nothing crazy. Well, a little bit crazy, but nothing huge. First of all, we have a Chicago Bear retiring. Ooh. We'll get to that in a little bit. But first I want to talk about, we finally got all of the Chicago Bears draft picks signed to contracts, and they're all set, ready to go, ready to come to mandatory practice days. They've all been at the mini camps and the rookie camps and the optional training days. They've all been there, but finally everybody's under contract. The last holdout was Jonathan Bullard, and I don't think he was holding out. It's just a weird thing now is we used to have Cliff Stein, who was in charge of getting all of our contracts done, and he's changed roles within the organization once Ryan Pace became the general manager, and we had a little bit of and this year in general, so a few years ago, the NFL, whenever you drafted, you had to sign all of your players, and there was no guidance as far as what you spent. It all went from how the very first player in the draft negotiated his contract was a cascade for everything going down, and it was a nightmare because you were negotiating with somebody and they would be like, well, this guy got this and I think I'm better than him even though he was drafted ahead of me, and it was a lot of shenanigans going on, and it took a long time to sign guys, and it was a complicated thing. But a couple years ago, the NFL instituted a slotting system for this is what this guy gets, this is what this guy gets, and you have a framework for signing a guy. So it's just a matter of time before everybody gets signed. And this year was a little bit of a holdup, and I don't know what the issue this year in particular was, but usually, since they've had this system in, is everybody's draft picks signed right away. But from what I've heard from cap guru type guys, that the third rounders are the most difficult to sign. And I don't know what precipitates that third rounder being tough to sign. But Jonathan Bullard is the Bears' third rounder, and several other third rounders were very late to sign around the NFL. So we finally got that done. Everybody's in camp. Nobody's hurt so far. Knock on wood. But we're ready to go, and this team is getting me a little bit excited. I mean, Super Bowl aspirations? No, but very competitive in this division, and no blowouts and eking games out that they otherwise would have lost. Yeah, I think that's a real possibility. You've got a revamped defensive line. You've got, I mean, if you look at it, is Eddie Goldman's going into his second year, so you figure, well, this is no foregone conclusion, is sometimes guys take a step backwards from that rookie season into the second season, the dreaded sophomore slump, if you will. But I really expect that between Vic Fangio and John Fox, that they're going to get these defensive players that were young last year to take the step forward. Having a whole offseason that now they understand the speed of the game. They've played within the speed of the game. Now it's time they watch film. And that's the thing is, when you go to the NFL, everything is different. It's the same game that you played in college and high school and pee-wees and whatever, but the game is played by you can't physically dominate over everybody else. You have to have the skill to dominate, and it's the speed of the game is faster, and people's preparedness for the game is better. You can't just go in there and be like, well, I'm super fast. In college, you could be like a Reggie Bush and be like, I'm just super fast, and you just absolutely dominate almost every team you play. You come into the NFL and you're Reggie Bush, and you're kind of a flop. You had some good seasons here and there, but you're kind of a flop. That's the thing. You can't just rely on talent you were born with. You have to develop that skill. And the difference between skill and talent is skill is talent plus hard work. You have to develop that. And that's what the Bears players are doing. So they had all of last season where they started to learn how to watch film and how to play in the NFL and the speed of the game. Now they have this offseason to train, get stronger, and study film more. So they come in this season, they're more prepared. They're prepared to be better players. So I expect an improvement from Adrian Amos. I expect an improvement for Eddie Goldman. And let's just start with Eddie Goldman. I expect him to be stronger than he was last year. There was a few times when he was able to just get blocked out of the play. He hadn't reached his true strength potential yet. And I expect him to just have the upper and lower body strength develop more from this offseason. I expect him to understand his role in the defense more. And he's got better talent on either side of him. You're going to have Jonathan Bullard, who I think is going to be a pretty talented guy. But you've got Akeem Hicks on the other side. I think he's a very talented football player. And then you look at your outside linebackers. You're going to have a healthy Pernell McPhee, and you're going to have a healthy Lamar Houston. Not to mention when you put in your first round pick, Leonard Floyd, is you expect more pressure on the quarterback, because Lamar Houston was getting to the quarterback early and often, come late in the season, and that was because he had a serious injury at the end of the season before. So even though he was healthy enough to play, he was definitely not at 100% that first part of the season. I mean, just watch him. He just didn't have the explosion. He just didn't look the same guy. And at the end of the season, when he was fully healed from that injury, he started to play really well. And now that he ended the season without any injuries, had the whole offseason to train and prepare with a healthy body, I expect big things out of Lamar Houston. We're finally going to see what we paid so much money for. Pernell McPhee, the same thing. We've got him. He should be healthy. He should have another offseason under his belt with watching film and learning this defense. And then you mix Leonard Floyd in there, who's going to be, you're going to have power rusher, then speed rush. You're going to be able to thunder and lightning these guys, and you have a better defensive interior line to stop the run and actually collapse the pocket a little bit. And that's the thing is if you have your interior defensive line, think about it. So you've got your offensive line, defensive line, the ball snapped. The two outside linebackers come crashing in, and they create that pocket around the quarterback. The quarterback can step up in that pocket and avoid the pressure around the corner, or he can sidestep and go out of the pocket and do that. But with the Bears' new revamped defensive line, I mean, this is all conjecture at this point because I haven't seen them on the field. We don't know if anybody's going to get injured or if people took steps back or whatever. But at this point, I think what you expect is those outside linebackers are going to collapse, are going to come around, and that pocket's going to, form. But you're going to have the interior defensive line. They've got enough guys that can rush the passer more so than stop the run. They're going to be able to collapse that pocket right from the get-go, and that quarterback's going to have nowhere to go. You're setting him up for the outside linebacker to get the sack. It's hard when you've got a 350-pound offensive tackle hanging on you when you're trying to sack the quarterback, and the quarterback's mobile. But when the quarterback has nowhere to go, it makes it a whole lot easier. If you ask any edge rusher in this NFL, if he knows he only has to get to a point rather than a man, he's going to get there much easier than to get to the man. Just the way it works. What else? The secondary. Secondary is still a little bit questionable in my mind. Is Adrian Amos, again, you hope he makes that step up in that second year. But who's going to be that safety that's on the other side of him? Right now, it's not going to be a veteran. It's going to be a young player. It's either going to be Bush, who they just drafted, or Harold Jones-Corte, who got a lot of reps last year in the season just out of necessity. You know who your starting cornerbacks are, barring injury, but who's going to fill in behind them? It's going to be a lot of youth in that secondary, and it's going to be no preferential treatment is going to be given. It's going to be who earned that spot. That's the way the Bears are going to do it. If you want to play, you better earn that spot. Linebackers, I'm not worried about, barring any injury. And I keep saying barring any injury because this is the NFL. But barring any injury, you have your inside linebackers. You've got two veterans there. They know what they're doing. And if not, you've improved your speed behind them with draft picks to step up and play. So I really expect good things out of there. Offense, this is where we had a retirement. Is going up to this point, we had the Bears cut ties with Matt Slauson. We know that's happened several weeks ago. But we kept hearing about how Ted Larson and Manny Ramirez, who signed prove-it deals, short, low-money deals, were going to be given the opportunity to win starting spots. That Ted Larson was going to be given the opportunity to win Matt Slauson's spot, and then Matt Slauson was gone. So now it's Lawson versus Cody Whitehair, the Bears' second-round pick, competing for that left guard spot. And then it was Manny Ramirez was going to push Ronas Grasu for that starting center spot. And that's just the way it was set up. That's how we were told it was going to be. That's how the beat writers said it was in practices so far and around Hallis Hall. And I even read an article recently about how Manny Ramirez was guiding Ronas Grasu how to be a better center, and although he was expecting to win the position. That was interesting. And then suddenly, out of the blue, Manny Ramirez announces his retirement. And when you listen to him, he sounds very sincere and a little bit apologetic about the timing of things. But he said his body, kept saying that his body told him it was time to retire. And it was time to go. And he's played a long time in this league. And you can ask any NFL player, sometimes your body just gives up on you. Ask Olin Kreutz when he left the Bears and went to the Saints. He didn't finish out that season. In the middle of the season, he retired. and he was considered a warrior with the Chicago Bears. But he couldn't, his body just couldn't do it anymore. I hope for Manny Ramirez's sake that that's not the case, that his body's still okay enough to play. I'm hoping what happened is that Hroniss Grasu got bigger and stronger in the offseason, and he just didn't think he would beat him out and didn't want to sit on the bench, go through practices every week so he could sit on the bench for games. I'm hoping that's the case. I'm hoping he just knew he was going to get beat out by a much improved center, and that's what happened. And that's I'm not basing that on anything, just other than I've heard stories that Hroniss Grasu spent the offseason getting stronger and working with strength and conditioning coaches and on a strength and conditioning program, and that's really what he needed. He was a little light in the ass, and he was a little weak. And Hroniss Grasu last year played like a rookie center. There's very few rookie centers that just step in day one and just dominate. Even the guy from the Packers, he stepped in and first half of the season, he just wasn't good at all. He was so bad that people were throwing a fit that he needed to be gone. But he got better and better as the season went on. Hroniss Grasu, he didn't show that same progression per se. But he was up and down. There was even sometimes within a microcosm of one game, is some plays he would look great. He made a pull block, or he did a really good play, and then sometimes you're just like, what the hell are you doing out there? What are you doing? It was up and down season, and if you listen to Olin Kreutz talk, that's really not uncommon for rookie centers. It's come the second year when they need to step up. And with Hroniss Grasu, I'm sure they worked with him. I'm sure they did. I'm sure Dave Magazoo worked with him. I'm sure the strength and conditioning coaches worked with him, because I think he's a talented guy. I scouted him as the best center in the draft last year, and I don't think I'm wrong in what I saw. But come to the NFL, I did point out that he's going to need to get stronger. But the Bears, I think, knew that too, and that's why they had Montgomery was supposed to be the starting center last year, but then he got hurt. What was the first game or second game? And Hroniss Grasu just got thrust into a position that he was supposed to be eased into. So we'll see how that goes. The rest of the offensive line, there's going to be competition. The Bears brought in another free agent tackle from the Carolina Panthers, and he's going to be challenging Jay Leno, Charles Leno Jr. He's going to be challenging him for that left tackle spot, which I still think that Leno's going to win. You've got Ted Lawson versus Cody Whitehair for that left guard spot. Hroniss Grasu right now doesn't have any competition. His competition's gone, but I'm imagining the loser of the left tackle spot is going to challenge for that center spot. So I'm going to guess it's 2 out of 3, between Ted Lawson, Hroniss Grasu, and Cody Whitehair. The 2 of those are going to be the starters, and one's going to be the backup. And it may be Ted Larson starting at center or Cody Whitehair starting at center. You don't know. Right guard, that's a lock. We've got Kyle Long, and then Bobby Massey at right tackle. I think those 2 are sort of locked. But you've opened up actual competition, which is something we've been hearing since the Jerry Angelo days. Is we're gonna have competition, and we never really got it. And we're actually starting to get it. You'd like to. I think honestly, if you would have kept Slauson, you would have had more competition. But they're trying to save that cap room and try to save a veteran player from just riding the pine. Wide receivers, barring any injuries, I think we're going to have a hell of a wide receiver core. Kevin White is, from all accounts, is looking phenomenal. I can tell you firsthand once I start going to training camp in July. But from all accounts, looking fantastic. We don't know what we're going to get from Alshon Jeffrey yet. He's He still hasn't participated in any of the optional training camps for the Bears. He's been working out on his own, but all reports are going to be he's going to show up to the mandatory things, and we'll see what we have. And the Bears, conflicting reports again, some say that the Bears are just going to let him ride out this franchise tag and see how he plays under the franchise tag and see how he plays healthy before they offer him a long-term contract. Another one say that they're going to offer him. They're going to try to get a deal done before the July deadline. This is the last day that they can get a long-term deal signed. Personally, if you asked old Sean from Swerski Sports, I think the Bears are going to lowball him in a long-term deal, or team-friendly, not lowball. It's going to be a lot of money. They're going to offer him a team-friendly deal, and if you look at the range of players about his talent, they're going to find the lowest comparable salary, and they're going to offer him something along those lines rather than the highest, and they're going to keep offering that and try to sweeten that pot a little bit until they can get a deal, because they don't want to offer him the huge, ridiculous money until they see what they have. Is he going to be a player that's lame the whole contract, or is he going to come out this year and just prove to be a stud? And that's a legitimate concern. If he was willing to take a lower end deal for comparable salaries in this NFL, then yeah, I think the Bears would be comfortable signing him to that. But if he wants 13, 14 million a season on a long-term deal, then what's the benefit of it? Just franchise tag him next year. You don't have to sign him to a long-term deal again. It's the nature of the beast. So I think that's how they're going to work it. Is they're going to try to get a team-friendly deal, and he's going to either have to accept it or ride out this franchise tag and hope to play well in him. And finally, one last thing is the Bears have. I was going through it a little bit, and after the Bears signed all of their rookies, after Manny Ramirez announced his retirement, after they've got rid of Slauson and some other veterans, the Bears have roughly $22 million left to spend under the cap. $22 million. That's a lot of money. And the thing I like about it is they've got room if any players get cut going forward, is the Bears have the option to add players. They have flexibility to add more players if there's injury, if they see a player they like that got cut for. And what you're going to see is you're going to see guys that get cut because they make a lot of money and they're not performing on the field. You're going to see players cut. So the Bears have room to add people, or once training camp opens up, if they see that there's deficiency at talent, they're going to add players, and they've got plenty of space to do it. They're one of the highest teams as far as how much money in cap space they still have. Or they could just not spend it, and next year, when even more players come off the books, they're going to have even more money to spend, and they're gonna be able to make a splash if need be. If they see a player that they think is in the prime that can really help this team be an impact, they can add them and still have that cushion, that luxury of the money. And it's great to see. It's great to see them not be like right up against the cap where they can't make any moves. So that's really all about for the Bears talk. I want to move into White Sox first, because I want to end on a high note, and I don't want to. That's not going to be the White Sox. This team went from having just a few short weeks ago the second best record in baseball, and you had national correspondents talking about this could legitimately be a Cubs versus White Sox World Series. And the White Sox were just tearing through the American League. They looked fantastic. And I said that I thought they were talented enough to be able to maintain. I mean, they're not that the way that they were maintaining that pace was ridiculous. Having they were on pace to have one of the best all-time records, but I felt that they legitimately could keep up this and win the division and be a force to be reckoned with in the playoffs. I legitimately thought that. But they have gone on this absolutely miserable streak, and they went from one of the second best record in baseball down to a 500 record. And there's a lot of factors here. And I'm listening to White Sox fans, and please, White Sox fans, if you have something to say, Twitter @Swerski Sports, Facebook.com/Swerski Sports, SwerskiSports.com. Let me know your thoughts. Because I'm not gonna lie, I'm a Cubs fan, but I'm a Cubs fan that has learned to appreciate the White Sox, and I watch quite a few White Sox games. But you're gonna have a really good perspective that I want to hear as a loyal fan. I want to hear what you have to say. But from the White Sox fans I've heard from, it has just become doom and gloom, and they have already reverted back to their feelings from last season, and they're calling for Robin Ventura's head and just drastic moves at this point. I mean, we've had them. They lost the series to the Mets. I mean, just this month, lost the series to the Mets, swept by the Tigers, losing a 2 out of 3 to the Nationals, and right now they are. And today they're going to avoid their blah blah blah. Today they're playing the swing game of the series. They won the first game against Kansas City. They lost the second game 4-1, and they're playing the third game of this series. And hopefully this will be potentially their first series win in like 5 series. This is a really bad streak that they're on. And it's not getting any easier either. As soon as they finish this series, they go right into a home series against the Tigers, who just swept you. They get 1 day off. They get 3 games on the road against Cleveland. And Cleveland is leading the division right now, and they're actually starting to get a little bit of separation. Followed by 4 games back to back against Boston in Boston. And Boston is lighting it up as far as putting up runs, and their offense has just been amazing. I think they're the highest scoring team in baseball. And if you're the White Sox, you're having trouble scoring runs and your pitchers aren't pitching well, so you're gonna have a really difficult time in Boston controlling that. And then you follow that up without a day off, is you come home and you get 3 against the Blue Jays, and the Blue Jays are struggling a little bit, and you should be able to get a footing on them. But just think back to 12 months ago, and that team was just absolutely crushing the baseball. So then finally, at the end of the month, they get a day off and 3 games in a row against the Twins, where you hopefully start righting the ship. But this White Sox team is just absolutely struggling. It's not just one facet of the team either. It's every facet. You've got the bullpen struggling. You've got the strength of your team, which is supposed to be your starting pitching, struggling. You can't get any run support. Nobody on your team is hitting. So your offense is struggling. It's all around. This team is just absolutely struggling. And, if you look back at some of these games, is sometimes you'll have an ace by the pitcher, like a couple, what was it, last week you had just an absolute gem by Quintana. And this was a game against the Mets, and Quintana gives up 1 run in 8 innings. So they gave up 1 run. They lose 1-0. The White Sox lost 1-0 on the absolute gem by Quintana, and they were shut out by Matt Harvey, who had been struggling like crazy this season. Matt Harvey hasn't looked like last season Matt Harvey. And the White Sox couldn't capitalize on that. And the one notable thing is the White Sox hitters didn't draw a single walk that game. Not a single one. None. 0. And the one saving grace that they had against the Mets is they had a win in 13.
It's Fat Albert.
And I want to give it up to my boy Fat Albers. He got a double and then went to third on an error and then scored on a sacrifice fly to win the game. So let's hear it up for Fat Albers. And if you're White Sox again, so they at least the White Sox did something the Cubs couldn't do, and that's beat the Mets. Ooh, low blow for my brethren. But then you just kind of skim through the White Sox sweep by the Detroit Tigers, and they got spanked 10-3 in one game. I mean, that's not a score that you want to have. And the Cubs, even in games that they've just lost control of, and it's gone out of control, they lose like 5-1. Like that's the kind of score they have. They don't get 10-3s. That's awful. You're facing Jordan Zimmerman, who was just absolutely wonderful at that point. He was like 7-2 with like a 2.5 ERA, but he was his first game back after a groin strain. You hope that you can capitalize on a guy that hasn't pitched in a while and jump on him early before he gets back in the groove, and the White Sox couldn't do that. And you have another poor start by Rodon. And Rodon at this point is fallen to like 2-5 with a 4.41 ERA. I think, unless he pitched the other day. But in this game, he gave up 4 runs, 7 hits on 6 innings pitched. You got to expect, you have to get more out of him. You can't. He pitches 4, 5, or 6 innings. He never goes past that. Never. You need more. You're already taxing your bullpen. Your bullpen has shown all kinds of leaks in the ship, and you keep going to them for having to go 4, 5, 3, 4, 5 innings. That's every single day. You can't keep doing that unless you've just got a bevy of arms that you can keep throwing at it. The Cubs, they've got a lot of long closers who are borderline starters like Travis Wood, Trevor Cahill, Adam Warren. Those are all guys that are starters that the Cubs have moved to the bullpen so they can pitch at long stretch innings. The White Sox don't have that kind of guy. They've got actual closers who are pitching half an inning, 1 inning. Then you're going to burn out those arms. So Rodon has another bad start. And the kicker for this game is this is where I start to lose any sort of confidence in Robin Ventura. Is you have Tyler Saladino batting second. You have JB Shuck batting 5th. Come on now. Those guys can't hit their way out of a wet paper bag, and you've got them right in the heart of your order. And I know that everybody's struggling, but you've got to at least put your best hitters, clump them together to get them some sort of protection in the order. Something. I mean, if you can bat around an Adam Eaton by pitching to Tyler Saladino, then you do it. I'm not scared of that. If you're going to bat around Abreu, who's got the potential of Burr. If you're going to bat around Todd Frazier to go to JB Shuck, yeah, sure, Frazier's not hitting for average, but the guy's got like 20 home runs. Any sort of minor mistake, and he's going to put it out of the park. What's JB Shuck going to do? Oh, shucks, I'm going to do nothing. In that game, you have 4 walks. 4 walks. That's it. Boom. That's it. You move on to the next game, another one where the White Sox give up 7 runs, lose 7-4, and that was a game you should win. It's a Chris Sale game. Chris Sale gave up 2 home runs in the 6th, and he pitched 6 1/3 and gave up 9 hits, 4 earned runs, and only 2 strikeouts. We'll get to Chris Sale in a minute because we want to know what's wrong with Chris Sale. But you expect to win Chris Sale games, especially if you're scoring 4 runs. You score 4 runs in a Chris Sale game, you got to expect to win that. The next game, they lose 5-2 to Detroit, and that's a Quintana game. You don't expect that either. And especially when you're playing against Verlander, who has like a 4 ERA and a 5-5 record. Again, you have Coates, who was brought up from AAA and then promptly sent back down to AAA by batting second for Robin Ventura. You have like a 270 batting average is like your highest batting average on this whole team. This is not how you win baseball games. You get spanked by the Nationals. You lose 10-5 first game, 11-4 the second game. You finally get a 3-1 win. You are giving up runs in buckets. I mean, season-wise, let's just look at the whole season for this White Sox pitchers. I'm going to rank them by ERA. Quintana still has a 2.66 ERA. He's pitched some really good games, but he's had some stinkers. Look at his game against the Tigers. But Quintana stands at 5-7 with a 2.66 ERA and a 1.09 WHIP. That's actually pretty good. But you go to Chris Sale. Suddenly, Chris Sale doesn't look so good. 2.87 ERA. For a guy that's 10-2 record, he's got almost a 3 ERA, and he's just these last several starts, he just hasn't looked right. Now, if you look at the last 30 days, Chris Sale has a 4.2 ERA. He's 3-2 with a 4.2 ERA. So if you think about that, do it a little extrapolation, is prior to this, this last 30 days, he was 7-0, and now he's 10-2, and his ERA went from, like a 2 to a 4.2. Like that's not good when you're Chris Sale. So you ask yourself, what's going on with Chris Sale? What's going on? You can look at the numbers a little bit, the actual measurables. He's lost velocity on every single one of his pitches. You've lost like 2 miles per hour on several pitches, and that's indicative of either you're losing your stuff or there's an actual arm issue. Is 2 miles an hour on your speed on your pitches doesn't seem like a lot, but it's a ton. If you look at the velocity difference between his fastball and his changeup, it's the lowest it's been. If you have no differentiation or little differentiation between your fastball and your breaking and your changeup, is you're not fooling anybody. Is that the object is you send heat by them, and then when you send them a changeup, is they're ready for that fastball and they're way out ahead with the bat. But if there's very little difference, only a couple miles an hour, you're not fooling players, and they may be out ahead of it a little bit, but that just means they're going to pull it to one field, or they're going to pull the ball, and maybe it goes foul, but maybe it goes fair and it gets a rocket hit, which is what you're seeing. And also, if you look at swing through per pitch rate, it's the lowest in his career for Chris Sale. Chris Sale used to throw balls by people, and he's not doing that now. Players are making contact with his ball, and that's bad news for the White Sox. And I don't care what Don Cooper is saying, that, we're changing the mechanics on Chris Sale a little bit, rather than striking everybody out and get higher pitch counts. We're letting them get the bat on the ball a little bit to have less pitches so we can go deeper in games. No, that's BS. Sorry. If you have your choice between having Chris Sale go out there and throw more pitches, but just absolutely dominate everybody and strike people out, versus giving up a bunch of runs and losing games while he's pitching, and have him pitch a longer game, nope, sorry, that's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. That's not what you're doing. Is Chris Sale right now, Chris Sale is either regressing or he has some sort of arm issue. One of the two, because this is a significant drop. This is not what we're seeing. This is not what we saw in the beginning of the season. And one start like this, okay, back-to-back starts like this, you start to get a question mark. But this is several starts in a row where you have not gotten a Chris Sale start out of Chris Sale. This is like what, 4 starts in a row. I start to really question it. And if you look at his last 7 games, Chris Sale has a 7.5 ERA. That's not what you expect out of an ace. It's just not what you expect out of a guy that early in the season, me and a lot of other people were saying Cy Young. So you're not getting anything out of Chris Sale in the last month. That's been, when you're the White Sox, you have to look at it. If you're going to be a contending team, if you're going to be a team that's going to go far in the postseason, you can have losing streaks. They're going to happen. They really are. Even for the Cubs, they're going to happen. But you have your top 2 studs in Sale and Quintana that are supposed to stop losing streaks. So you don't expect to ever lose more than 3 in a row because Sale and Quintana come in there and stop the losing streak. That's what you're seeing with the Cubs. Is every 5th day is you get Arrieta and you get Lester. You don't expect to go on losing streaks, and the Cubs really haven't. Have they lost more than 2 in a row? I think back-to-back is the worst they've gone. They may have lost back-to-back and then won a game and lost more back-to-back, but they're not losing like that because they've got their pitchers come out and dominate, whereas the White Sox aren't getting those dominating starts by Chris Sale lately, and Quintana will throw a gem and then follow it up with a stinker. Let's see. Season to date, Miguel Gonzalez. Right now, he's 3-1 with a 3.57 ERA, and that's for a 5th starter and a guy that you took off the garbage heap. That's not bad. And I think he's earned that 5th starter spot, which is one that you have not gotten anything from. Rodon is 2-5 with a 4.41 ERA. That's your 3rd starter. He's supposed to be your stud. He's supposed to be this hotshot guy that you rushed up through the minor leagues and was going to dominate, and he's just not doing it. The control isn't there. He's got nasty stuff. He just has no control, and you see it. Some games he'll just go out there and look great, and then other games he just doesn't have his stuff and looks bad. And then Matt Latos, we'll get to him in a second, but he's got, on the season, has a 4.62 ERA. 4.62 ERA. And that's after starting. He was on fire the first, 6 starts of the season. If you look at the past 30 days, his ERA is up over 12. And that's what we'll get into this a little bit, is the White Sox started making moves. Is they can't keep losing like this. They can't. They started making moves. First one, Matt Latos designated for assignment. Bam, bam, boom. He's gone. And they bring in James Shields. Now, we'll get to him in a second. But Matt Latos is gone. They got rid of him. They can't keep a guy who has, in his last month, has a 12.46 ERA. They can't do it. His whip was over 2. You can't have a whip over 2 and be the number 4 starter on a winning team. They can't happen. So if you're the White Sox, you just start pairing players off. Who is not helping us? Who is not helping us that we could just part ways with? So they move on. Jimmy Rollins. Jimmy Rollins was not pulling his weight. Boom, gone. Adios. Jimmy Rollins had a great career. He's a borderline Hall of Fame player. But he's just not helping the White Sox in 2016. Gotta go. This is not 2007 Jimmy Rollins. This is 2016 Jimmy Rollins. He's gone. So how do you replace those guys? Well, if the White Sox make a trade, bring James Shields over to be that number 4 starter. Now, pros and cons of James Shields. James Shields is 2 seasons ago, and before that, was a very good pitcher. He was one that, when they were going after John Lester, the Cubs were throwing a lot of money at James Shields. The Padres swooped in and offered him stupid amounts of money. It was just what the Cubs just didn't want. It was more than they were comfortable paying. But the Cubs were offering him significant money in a significant deal. So this is not a player that is a bad pitcher. He is just going through a bad stretch. And partly with the Padres, that's the bad team right there. And it's hard if you're a pitcher. And I've been to the park, and I don't know the actual dimensions. I'm speaking anecdotally here. And usually I speak from statistics, but anecdotally, I've been to that park, and it's not a big park. And based on the way the weather goes, I bet if you pull up the statistics, it's a total hitter's park. So you add that as your pitcher pitching in a hitter's park. You add that's you're on a bad team, and they're not giving you run support. And it's really hard to pitch when you're pitching from behind. You start trying to do things, and you're on a bad team that's not scoring runs. You try to do things to get guys out, take more risks, because you can't give up. If you play it safe and give up your normal amounts of runs, you're still going to lose. So you might as well try anything to get guys out, and to throw maybe some more risky pitches, and it's just not paying off for them. And sometimes it's just the pitching coach philosophy and not getting along with the catchers. There's a lot of factors in it, but as long as he's healthy, I think he's was worthwhile pickup. Not the answer to all of your problems, but a worthwhile pickup. But just he came in first game and just didn't look good. I really expect James Shields, and part of the reason you bring James Shields in is he's a 200 inning a year guy. What does that mean for you? You've got a lot of guys on your back end. Rodon doesn't go a lot of innings. Gonzalez doesn't go a lot of innings. Danks didn't go a lot of innings. None of your 3, 4, or 5 starters went a lot of innings. Quintana can go a lot of innings. Doesn't always, but he can. And Sale can go a lot of innings. But 3, 4, and 5 starters don't go a lot of innings, and they tax your bullpen. If you bring in a guy like James Shields, he gives you a lot of innings. He gives you the opportunity to save some of your bullpen a little bit. He's an innings eater. But you expect him to be an innings eater and pitch well enough for you. You have to expect that. And I think once he has a little bit of time working with Cooper and he starts working with the White Sox catchers, I really think that next start you're going to see a much better start from James Shields. The guy's a competitor, and barring any sort of injury that he's not talking about, that the White Sox training staff didn't, and their medical staff didn't find in his physical, I think he's going to be all right for you. And that sort of stabilizes your back end of your rotation a little bit. You've got to, if you're going to go back on the winning ways, Chris Sale's going to have to find the Chris Sale the first part of the season or last year. Quintana, you're fine. Rodon's going to have to start being consistent with his location. James Shields, you're going to have to get the better James Shields out of him. And Gonzalez, he's pitching for a 5th starter, not bad. But part of the problem, too, is the White Sox aren't giving anybody run support. And sometimes if you give a pitcher run support, he has a completely different game. You get run support adds a little confidence. If you're up 1-0 and you're pitching late in the game, yeah, you got a little more stress built up. But if you're up 6-0, you just go on autopilot, and that's when you're pitching your best stuff. The White Sox need to score more runs. You can't score 3 runs a game in the American League and expect to win baseball games. And that's exactly what the White Sox are doing. You look at Boston, I'm sure they're the highest scoring team, but they're scoring like 5.5 runs a game. You need to score more runs if you're the White Sox. Part of that is hitters aren't hitting. But part of that is Robin's manipulation of the batting order is atrocious. So Melky Cabrera is by far and away right now your best hitter. He's hitting .288 on the season. But Adam Eaton was batting like .330 or something for a while. He's come way down to earth. He's batting right now. He's batting .264. He's your second highest batting average on the team. .264. You go down from there. Jose Abreu, .260. Austin Jackson, .254. Avi Garcia, .250. Tyler Saladino, .247. Brett Lawrie, .238. Alex Avila, 228. Todd Frazier, 215. 215 with 19 home runs. So that's some serious like Rob Deere type numbers. That's you just can't do that. Let's look at number of walks. Like let's rank their guys in number of walks. And I'm curious a little bit is what we'll see with the Cubs versus the White Sox. So the White Sox at this point have played 62 games. 62 games. Todd Frazier has 31 walks. Adam Eaton has 26. 24 for Laurie. And it goes down from there. Is the White Sox players aren't drawing walks. They're not drawing walks. And that's been the hallmark for the Cubs. The Cubs hitters aren't hitting. If you look, for the most part, the Cubs hitters aren't hitting well. They're not hitting well. But they have timely hitting, and they have players on base. So when they do get a home run, they have a guy or two on base. There's a big difference between a solo home run and a 3-run jobber. And it's having guys on base. The White Sox aren't doing that. And that's even more sad is because they have a designated hitter. Designated hitter's not hitting either. And you need guys to start being more patient at the plate. It has to happen. You can't go up there and sure, the White Sox aren't striking out like these terrible rates. They're actually putting the ball in play when they're making outs, but you need to have guys that are hitting well or getting on base through walks. The on-base percentages have to be better. The on-base percentages need to be better, and you need to start scoring runs. And the White Sox, Robin Ventura needs to start organizing this lineup to maximize player protection. You can't have a JB Shuck batting right in the middle of the heart of your lineup. You can't do it. Same with Tyler Saladino or Alex Avila. You need to put your big boppers all in a row because they're the ones that are driving in a majority of your runs. And if they're going to be the ones carrying you, you need to start protecting them in the lineup. Robin Ventura's lineups have just been absolutely bad this season. And when you started off the season and you were hot, part of it was your pitching was great. Pitching was lights out. You looked good. So your offense was actually producing runs, and you had a defensive roster in there that you had one of the best defenses in baseball. And it all predicated from Austin Jackson being your center fielder and moving your previous center fielder and Adam Eaton over to right field. So you had a very, very good defensive center fielder, and then you had an absolutely brilliant defensive right fielder, and that made your defense that much better. You improved your infield defense by adding Todd Frazier and Brett Laurie. All these things, you improved your defense. But what's happening now is Austin Jackson's not hitting, and he's injured now. He comes out of the lineup. You have to move Adam Eaton back to center field. And that drastically makes your outfield defense worse. So you have a worse defense. You're still not getting the hits you need. And your pitching is starting to fall apart. You can't blame all of this on Robin Ventura. But the parts you can blame Robin Ventura are how he's using his bullpen, how he's arranging this lineup, and the fact that I'm hearing rumors that the clubhouse is starting to go. Every clubhouse is great when people are winning. Winning is this magical thing that keeps everybody happy. But once you start losing, that's when you show the true face of your clubhouse. Maybe the Cubs, who seem all best friends and everybody loves each other, maybe if they went on a 10, 15 game losing streak, something ridiculous, that maybe it holds up and they stick with each other. Maybe they fall apart and Joe Madden can't hold them together, but we don't know that. But the White Sox, we're seeing that ugly face start to turn. We're seeing it. There's divides in the locker room. Jose Abreu is withdrawn, not being with team members, and he's part of the reason that they're in this slump. Is they need Jose Abreu to bat in the 280s. They need him to pick up the number of home runs. He's got 7 home runs this season. 7. You can't be the big bopper on this team and have 7 home runs at this point. And the sad part is Todd Frazier has 19 home runs. Jose Abreu is second on the team with 7. He's on pace. The White Sox are not hitting enough home runs. They're not getting on base enough. They're not hitting for average. The pitching's stinking. You have a manager who's just completely losing it. And regardless of, is this Robin Ventura's fault, I'm of the opinion he's got to go anyway. He's not doing any good things for you. So if you keep him, all you're doing is just maintaining the status quo and not having to shell out for another contract. But I'm of the opinion that you have to shake things up. And you've got a guy who was a manager across town and was a very well-liked manager, and he had the support of Jen Thea until Joe Madden comes. And you can't blame them for letting him go for a Joe Madden, because Joe Madden is one of the best managers in baseball. But I loved Ricky Renteria, and I think he's a good manager, and I think he'll do fine. And it's a guy that enough of a shakeup because you get rid of Robin Ventura, you let him have a crack. It's not like he's new to this team. People are going to rally around him because they already know him and like him. And it's going to be an easy transition rather than bringing somebody else in. I think you got to pull the trigger, fire Robin Ventura. Whether it's all his fault or not, he has part of the blame. And the easiest thing to do is fire your manager. What other options do you have? You sent some shockwaves through by getting rid of Latos and by getting rid of Jimmy Rollins. So you already said, hey, if you're not performing, we're going to get rid of you. Then the next best shakeup is you get rid of Robin Ventura. Say goodbye. Move Ricky Renteria in, and then you need to make a move to get a left-handed RBI bat. Cough, Jay Bruce, cough. That's what you need in this team. Or hell, bring a Jose Bautista over. He's going to be available soon. Bring a Bautista over. Bring somebody in here that's going to drive runs in and add an extra bat in this lineup, so you're not relying on Avi Garcia or Tyler Saladino. And then the one last thing I want to mention about the White Sox, and I know they just had the MLB draft, and I'm still sort of processing that because I don't follow high school baseball or college baseball, so I have to read up reports on some of these guys, but we'll talk about that next week, I promise. One last thing is, after getting rid of Jimmy Rollins, is the White Sox brought up Tim Anderson. I don't think that's something they wanted to do this early in the season, just because they don't feel he's an MLB quality shortstop as far as fielding goes. And the guy has, his batting average is basically his on-base percentage. He doesn't walk at all. Those were things that he needed to work on. And they weren't ready to bring him up. But sort of necessity brought him up. Jimmy Rollins wasn't doing anything. Tyler Saladino is not doing anything. You start bringing guys up. And I fully expect the White Sox to start being more aggressive in who they bring up from their minor league system. Don't be surprised if Carson Fulmer doesn't come up in a reasonable amount of time, because they need to see what they have. I have a feeling the White Sox will go all in if they can see that the young talent is helping out this team. Look at the Cubs. Do you think they would have gone in all in this offseason by bringing in Lackey and Heyward if the young players hadn't come up and started hitting? That's just the thing, is if you see you've got your young players contributing and making your team better, then you go all in and you go for the win this season. So Tim Anderson, first game, and he go 2 for 3 So it's a nice start. He's still not going to ever walk, but it's a nice start, and you hope that for the White Sox sake that he sparks this team to start playing better. We shall see. So let's move on over to the north side, and then we'll wrap up this show. And one quick thing is, with these several losses, the White Sox went from first place down to fourth place. They're 3.5 games back behind Cleveland, and they're a half game behind Detroit, half game behind Kansas City. They can catch Kansas City and flip-flop spaces with them and tie Detroit, move back up to second place today if they get a win. But if you're the White Sox, you might fall behind Cleveland in the division, but you can't fall behind 3 teams and be in fourth in your division. Once you start getting closer to the end of the season, it's not always about the number of games you're behind. It's about the number of teams you're behind as well. Because what happens, especially when they're division teams, is they start playing each other, and it all evens out. Nobody's going to go on this massive losing streak. You're going to have to maintain, maybe 1, maybe 2 teams ahead of you, and you've got to keep them within striking distance if you're the White Sox. You can't fall behind by the time All-Star break comes around. So yeah, let's talk about the Cubs. Against the Dodgers, is you take 3 out of 4 games. You can't score any runs, though. I mean, you have, or I'm sorry, was it 2 of, you won the series against the Dodgers. I can't remember if it was 3 out of 4 or 2 out of 3, but you're not scoring any runs. You're winning 2-1. You're not getting walks. You're not getting on base, but you get yourself a gem by John Lester. In the first game of that series, you actually get a loss by Jake Arrieta. A loss by Jake Arrieta. You don't see those. Like I said, the Cubs won 3 of 4, with the only loss coming with an Arrieta start. You expect if Arrieta gets the start, you're winning 4 out of 4 against the Dodgers. The Cubs are a weird team. They draw the walks, and like I keep saying, is you draw the walks, you get guys on base, and the more guys you see up at the plate, the more times you see a pitcher, the more pitches he throws, the more likely you are to start getting hits. And when you get hits and you got guys on base, you're going to actually drive home runs. And that's what the Cubs have been doing. Their batting averages are pretty abysmal, but you got guys on base and you're getting timely hits. And that's been their thing. And when they run across pitchers that are aggressive and throw a lot of strikes and challenge the Cubs hitters, that's when the Cubs hitters just aren't playing that well. But after a rough month of May, the Cubs come through, win 3 out of 4 against the Dodgers. They win 2 out of 3 against the Arizona Diamondbacks. And then they go win 2 out of 3 against the Phillies. And today they're going for the series to take 2 out of 3 against Atlanta. It's the Cubs. The Cubs are on an absolute roll. It's just absolutely amazing how good this team is, and this is a team that still has weaknesses that they can still work on. This is not a final product. This is not the team we're necessarily going to see come October. This is a team that's still improving. They could still add players to make them better. But right now, the Cubs are on a pace of 700, like a 700 winning percentage. It means they're winning 7 out of 10 games. They are 5 games ahead of the second best team in baseball, which is the Washington Nationals. They're 5 games better. We're not even at the All-Star break yet, and the Cubs are just running away with it. They win 3 out of 4 against the Dodgers, and then that first game against Arizona. That first game in that Arizona series, which started last weekend, they get a 6-0 win. Lackey goes 6 2/3, doesn't give up any runs, 9 strikeouts. He had some struggles in that 4th inning, but he gets double play to get out of it. And at this point, you've won 3 in a row, 9 out of 10. This was a pitcher's duel for the most part of the game with Archie Bradley, who pitched really well for Arizona. But in the or in the 8th inning, the Cubs exploded for 5 runs, and Russell and Baez led the way with 2-run doubles. And that's when, that's the thing about the Cubs is you may hold them down, but they never, ever give up. They always feel like, all right, well, we're down 4 runs in the 9th. Well, we can score 4 runs in the 9th. They have the confidence and they have the talent to be able to do that. If you told me the Cubs were down 4 runs in the bottom of the 9th and they won 5-4 without going in extra innings, I'd be like, okay, I don't doubt that. I watch this team and I never feel like they're out of it. I want to pull up the actual numbers, but I don't think. I'm trying to think of what their worst loss in the month of June so far, and we're like halfway through the month of June. They've lost a 3-2 game, another 3-2 game, and they lost 5-1. So in the month, they've lost by 4 runs 1 time. What about May? I'm trying to see what their worst loss was. They had a 7-4 loss and a 6-1 loss. All right, so a 6-1 loss is their worst loss so far. A 5-3 loss, a 5-3 loss, 4-2 loss, 2-1 loss, 1-0 loss, a 4-3 loss, a 5-0 loss. Maybe that might be their worst because they didn't score anything. All right, here we go. Sorry, they lost April 23rd. They lost 13-5 to the Reds. I think that was the game that Lackey just blew up and had a bad game. But other than that, since April, their worst loss is 5-0. They've really kept all these games close. Like if you listen, all their losses are by 1 or 2 runs. They really keep these games close, and they're all winnable by the end of the game. A 13-5 one, you sort of feels out of hand. 5-0 is much more reasonable, but when you're losing 5-3, you feel like at any point you come and win those games. Game 2 against Arizona, the Cubs won 5-3 behind another great game by Jason Hammel. You expected more runs on this one because Escobar came into the game with a 14 ERA. You have Rizzo get his 13th home run, Fowler with his another leadoff home run. Hammel pitched 7 innings, gave up 1 hit, 2 walks, 6 strikeouts, and the one hit he gave up was a home run in the first inning. The Cubs whacked a bad pitcher. They were stymied the rest of the way, and things started unraveling in the 4th. It's just the Cubs just steamroll these teams. They chase starting pitchers away, and they start eating at your bullpen. And that's what happens is by the end of a series is you've already seen their bullpen, everybody, and you've already beaten up on them. You beat up their starting pitchers, and the only way that you can keep them at bay is be aggressive with your starting pitchers and go after them every at bat. And then last Sunday, the Cubs lost. They lost another start by Arrieta. They lost 3-2 to Arizona. It was another. Arrieta falls to 9-1 with a 1.8 ERA, but he didn't have a terrible game. He had 2 walks, gave up 5 hits. Oh, I'm sorry. He gave up 9 hits, 3 runs, 12 strikeouts. So it wasn't a bad game by Arrieta. They got to him with a few base hits. The Cubs, on the other hand, had only 2 walks and 5 hits, and one of them was a Baez home run. It didn't help that Rizzo sat out that game, Heyward sat out that game, Bryant played first, and you're starting to see Anthony Rizzo resting more with Chris Bryant filling in and playing first base. And the starting pitching for that game for Arizona, and Arizona is another team like the Rockies that's really aggressive with the Cubs. The Corbin, the starting pitcher for Arizona, going into this game, he had a 4.73 ERA, but he pitched 7 innings with only giving up no walks and 2 runs for Arizona. And that's the key right there for if you're a team playing the Cubs. And then Monday night, you have the Cubs playing Philadelphia for the first game of a 3-game series, and Lester was absolutely brilliant. 8 innings pitched, no runs. Jason Heyward hits a home run, and then in the 9th inning, they're up 6-0, and the White Sox or the Cubs need to get 3 outs and not give up 6 runs. Justin Grimm promptly comes in and gives up a 3-run home run. Rondon comes in and gives up a solo home run. And at that point, I'm like, oh my God, there's no outs. They just gave up 4 runs like that. I turned it off. Couldn't deal. My anxiety was way too much. And as a Cubs fan, that's what I do, is I just get this anxiety whenever anything goes wrong, that everything is going to go wrong. And that's just part of being almost 40 and never seeing my team win a World Series. But they came in and they nailed it down after that. Rondon came in and nailed it down after that. And the bad part about that one is you lost Soler to a hamstring injury. So after that, you follow it up with, you lose a 3-2 game against the Phillies after that. Bounce back and win 8-1 in the rubber match of that series. And you get a day off, and then you get spanked by the Braves in the first game, and then you come back and spank them in the second game. Today is the rubber game of that series. And that's the weird thing, is the Cubs struggle against teams like Colorado, Arizona, Milwaukee, Atlanta. And these are teams they're not going to see in the playoffs. These are teams that are not in the playoffs. These are teams that are kind of in the toilet. Atlanta has possibly the worst record in baseball. They're 18-43 right now. It's like the inverse of the Cubs record. For as good of a record the Cubs have, is the Braves have like the inverse record. Milwaukee is 29-33, so they're a middle of the road, sub 500 team. You can't lose that many games to them. Arizona's 27-37. You can't be losing to them. Though they lost to San Diego. San Diego's 26-37. And Colorado's 29-33. These are all sub 500 teams that you're losing to. But then you go and you sweep the Nationals, who have the second best record in baseball. The team has 24 losses, and you handed them 4. You beat St. Louis. You beat Pittsburgh. You beat these good teams. You beat the Dodgers, who are the second best team in that division. You played San Francisco tough when you were in a struggling spot and they were on fire, and they're the best team in that division. You're beating up on the good teams and struggling against the weak teams, and it's a weird thing to have. But the one thing I want to talk about with the Cubs is the reason we went through their losses, and you saw that how many of them were just really close games. And part of that is, look at the starting pitching for the Cubs. Who's the weak link on that team? Who's the weak link on the Cubs' starting 5 rotation? Do they have one? I mean, Jake Arrieta is your number 1, your ace. He won the Cy Young last year. And let me look at him really quick. Right now, he's got a 10-1 record. He's got a 1.86 ERA and a .95 WHIP. That's pretty darn good. And that's including that his last couple games, he's given up some runs and has a few hits. So even if you want to go the last 30 days, Arrieta's got a 1.05 WHIP and a 2.77 ERA. And that's him pitching bad. You've got a sub 3 ERA. John Lester, he's your number 2 starter. John Lester's got a 2.06 ERA, a .97 WHIP, and in the last 30 days, he's got a .89 WHIP and a 2.2 ERA. It's your number 2 starter. You want to go number 3, John Lackey? All right. John Lackey's got a 2.63 ERA, a .93 WHIP, and over his last 30 days, he is got a .86 WHIP. Oh, I'm sorry, that's Lester. He's also got a .86 WHIP and a 1.34 ERA over the last 30 days. That's your number 3 starter. Oh, you want to go to number 4 starter? Jason Hamill? Jason Hamill's got a 2.36 ERA for the whole season and a 1.11 WHIP. And over his last 30 games, which he's had some struggle games, he's got a 1.07 WHIP and a 2.86 ERA. And finally, you want to go to your number 5 starter? All right, number 5 starter. Kyle Hendricks has a 2.9 ERA over the whole season and a .94 whip. So for the entire season, of your 5 starters, you only have one with a whip of greater than 1. Whip is, if you're not familiar, it's a walks plus hits per inning pitch. So they add up all of your walks plus all of the hits you've given up and divided by the number of innings. And 1 is really good. Every starting pitcher on the Cubs has an under a 1 whip except for Jason Hamill. And over the last 30 days, his whip is under 1. And over the last 30 games, or the 30 days for Kyle Hendricks, your number 5 starter, he's got a 2.76 ERA with a .86 whip. And if you want to look at his last 3 games, his last outing was June 7th versus Philadelphia. That one was a little bit of a rough one. He went 5 innings and gave up 2 runs. But the game before that against the Dodgers, all right, well, he went 8 innings, gave up 2 runs. And the game before that was against Philadelphia as well. And he went complete game, 1 earned run. And in those games, he had 7 strikeouts, 6 strikeouts, 6 strikeouts. And over 3 games, he had a total of 12 hits. So he averaged giving up 4 hits a game. That's your number 5 starter. So where is the weak link? Where is the pitcher that you have to win that game against if you're the opposing team? I mean, for the first 4 starts or so of the season, the first month of the season, it was Lackey because Lackey just didn't look good those first few starts. But now he's just absolutely on fire. I mean, the last 3 starts for Lackey, he's 3-0, and he's given up 1 earned run in his last 3 games. 1 earned run. So his last game was against Philadelphia. He went 7 innings, gave up 3 hits, no earned runs, 8 strikeouts. Against Arizona, he went 6 2/3, gave up 5 hits, no earned runs, 9 strikeouts. And then the one before that was against Philadelphia. He went 7 innings, gave up 4 runs, 4 hits, 1 earned run, and 6 strikeouts. 1 earned run in his last 3 games. That's your weak link at your pitcher. That's just disgusting. Like, where do you go from there? You've got, barring any injury. I mean, if you do get an injury in your starting rotation, it's never a good thing. But they have Adam Warren, he's a guy that can absolutely be a starting pitcher. He's started games for the Yankees in the past couple years. He can come in and be that guy for you. So Travis Wood is probably your next best guy. He was a starter before you started adding a bunch of stud pitchers. He's got a 2.25 ERA on the season. Trevor Cahill is a guy who would have been a starter on another team. He decided to come back to the Cubs and pitch out of the bullpen. He's got a 2.28 ERA. Both of those guys would be your next starter should somebody get injured. Now, where that hurts you hurts your bullpen because they're important cogs in your bullpen. But the Cubs aren't out of the woods yet. They've got some flaws. Starting pitching is not one of them. But the bullpen is a little bit. It would be lovely to see them add a left-handed, and they've already got some injuries in the outfield. Is Matt Caesar hurt, Soler hurt. So what do the Cubs do? They trade Arizmendi Alcantara to Oakland to get Chris Coghlan back. Now, Chris Coghlan has looked awful for Oakland. He's looked so bad. It just, he forgot how to hit. And if you look, when he played for the Cubs last year, of his hits, a third of them were line drive hits. And right this season, it's 10% of them are line drive hits. He's not making contact. He's striking out a lot more. And part of it is you're playing on a bad team surrounded by bad hitters, and your philosophy is different. And hopefully the move coming back to the Cubs, he's going to be platooning again, but he was a nice hitter. He had a career year last year. I think he had 16 home runs. So I'm thinking the Cubs are just hoping that Soler started to finally hit before he gets the hamstring injury, and Caesar was their perfect fill-in guy, and both are going to be fine. They're just little ding injuries, but they'll be out a week or two. I think they put Soler on the 15-day disabled, so they'll be back soon. But you can't fall apart until that point. So they bring up Albert Almora, who has looked really nice coming up so far. Just two absolutely brilliant plays in the outfield. One, he's in left field and he makes his running, diving slide, knees first, to avoid the wall. And the other one where he makes the over-the-head catch and as the outfield assist at home plate. The guy can play field. Like, he can field. He's absolutely fantastic. But he's still struggling at the plate, and that's expected of a young hitter. He's only batting .222 in his couple of games and couple of at-bats that he's had so far. But Albert Almora eventually is going to be that starting center fielder for the Cubs. Once they decide to let go of Fowler and he goes somewhere else and signs a big contract, Albert Almora is going to be the one that steps up and plays that center field spot. But over the last 30 days, is Soler started hitting. He was hitting 300. You finally started to get something out of Soler, and it's what we've all been expecting. And then he gets hurt, and hopefully when he comes back from the hamstring injury, he just picks right up where he left off. But if you're looking at the Cubs roster, is another weakness they have besides that needing that left-handed closer, left-handed bullpen arm, is they're not hitting well. Ben Zobrist is hitting really well, and he's been a huge cog in what you do. But over the past 30 days, it's a nice little benchmark. Is Arrieta is batting .308, Hamels batting .286, Chris Bryant's batting .280, Dexter Fowler's only batting .257. He's really come back down to earth. JHey's hitting .250. He's starting to warm back up. David Ross only .250. Baez .233. Rizzo .233. So you're not getting a lot of hits. I mean, if you think about it, is your center fielder, who was the old saying from Joe Madden, is "you go, we go," is he's starting to come back down to earth, and what you expect from him. Your right fielder is heating up a little bit. He's got some home runs under his belt, and he's finally starting to get. He's getting comfortable back with his weird, awkward swing. Left field, you started to figure it out, but you had some injuries there with Caesar and Soler. First base, Rizzo is bopping a lot of home runs, but he's getting on base, but he's just not getting base hits. Second base is Zobrist has been outstanding. Shortstop is Addison Russell, fantastic fielding shortstop. He's just light with the bat. I mean, he's gotten some nice timely hitting. Third base, Chris Bryant is actually playing really well. And then your utility guy, Baez, he's gotten some big hits for you, but his batting average is terrible. And at the catcher, you're just not getting a lot. I mean, you're getting some timely hits with Ross and Montero, but you're not getting good, consistent production. But the thing is if you look at walks, that's where you differentiate between the White Sox not hitting and the Cubs not hitting. Zobrist, 39 walks. You've got three players that are over 30 walks, and then another three players that are over 20. And then from there, you've got Montero's got 19 walks, and he's a guy that was on the injured reserve for a couple of weeks. 17 for Soler, who's another guy who's hurt, and he was platooning. 14 for David Ross, who is he's your part-time catcher. So if you're the Cubs, you're getting on base, you're getting walks, you're getting timely hitting, and that's how you're scoring your runs. But don't think for a second that the Cubs brass isn't worried about consistent production, because they have a tendency of, when, like I said, is you have a pitcher that's throwing strikes and being aggressive with them, is they get shut out for games, or they score really low runs, and it's their pitchers that have to keep them in those games. they are going to try to add a bat if possible. I mentioned two names that I mentioned for the White Sox, and don't be surprised if the Cubs don't go after those. Is one, don't be surprised if they add a certain big bopper bat from Toronto, and don't be surprised if they go after Jay Bruce from the Reds. And those are guys that can help them by driving in runs and being more consistent outfield production in the bat, especially when you've lost Schwarber. They've got all of the production, or the minor league players and the chips to make any of these moves. It's going to be what they decide to do with those. And again, with the Cubs, they just had their draft as well, and they didn't have a pick until the third round. But next week we'll start talking through those. So the Cubs still fantastic. The Cubs are still fantastic. They're playing great, and they're going to play better baseball. And they've got coming up in their schedule is they finish up the series today against Atlanta. Then they go 3 games against the Cardinals. Then they get 4 against the Marlins, 3 against the Reds, and then is when they start the big time at the end of the month. They start against the Mets in New York. That's the series I want to see. Marlins, you get 4 games against them, 3 games against the Reds. As far as I'm concerned, they should. It's the Cubs. They don't do well against the bad teams, but they should be able to take all 7 of those. They should be able to take 2 out of 3 from the Cardinals, especially at home. And then hopefully they have momentum going into that Mets series, because that's really going to set that stage. Is they swept you in the National League Championship Series. You need to come out and show that for a psyche point is, it's weird. It's last season during the regular season, the Cubs swept the Mets. I think it was 9-0 or 7-0 or whatever it was. But then they get swept by them in the playoffs. And the Cubs have to come back and just show they can win that series against the Mets, that they're not afraid and that they can compete with them and win. And it's going to be, both teams are young and hungry. They're going to go after each other, and they're going to try to win that series. It's not going to be a who cares, it's regular season. Both teams are going to try to win this and show that they're the dominant team in the National League. So that's going to wrap it up for this episode. Next week, I promise we'll talk about the draftees for the Cubs and the Sox. Hopefully we have some more Bears news. But thank you guys so much for listening. Please make sure you share this. Make sure you go to our social media, Twitter at Swerski Sports, and Facebook.com/Swerski Sports, and our website, SwerskiSports.com. Make sure you subscribe however you listen, whether that's iTunes, Stitcher, or YouTube. And until next time, bear down.
Cubs win! What a lucky break! The good Lord wants the Cubs to win!
We thank Ditka and God for all they have provided.
Cubs win! Cubs win! Cubs win!
Oh, I don't want her. You can have her. She's a Packer fan. She can't fit in my van.
And she looks like number New Yorkers. Smoking crack is not legal on the plains.
Bears 31 to -7.
The Bears. Oh, when the Bears go bearing down.